Hi, good morning. Welcome to I'm Not Bossy, I'm the Boss, how these women have navigated their male-dominated industries. I know we're in transition between sessions here, but just have a seat. The doors will get closed in a couple of minutes. My name is Joey Tack. I'm the chair of the 2023 CRS Agenda Committee. Appreciate you being here. A couple of reminders. The UMG lunch at the Ryman is happening today. Following this session, shuttles will be picking up and dropping off on the first floor Omni 5th Avenue entrance between Bob's and Bongo Java. You know the spot. We have some great panels after the UMG lunch today, starting at 2:30 p.m. We're going to give you a little bit of extra time to be able to get back for those. Don't miss Higher Education, appealing to a new generation of employees, and the panel called Just Effing Do It, The Rewards of Taking Risks. Let us know how we're doing throughout the day at CRS and throughout this seminar. You can rate the panels that you go to on your app on that panel session page immediately following the conclusion of each, and you have a chance at winning a 2024 CRS registration. And before the session starts, just a friendly reminder, please everybody put your cell phones in silent mode. And with that, I'd like to introduce the moderator for our next panel, Zena Burns.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am honored to moderate this conversation with our esteemed panel of panelists here. I'd like to introduce them. Heather Cohen is Executive Vice President of the Weiss Agency, where, as a broadcast talent agent, she represents and develops the careers of many of the industry's most successful local and syndicated personalities. These names range from Elena Smith and Fred Toucher to Nick Cannon and Angela Yee and beyond. We'll hear more about everyone's backgrounds as we talk today, and Heather's includes being an executive producer and APD at New York City talk radio station WOR early in her career. After that, Heather was vice president of programming for Greenstone Media, which was a talk radio network targeting women. Heather is also a longtime board member and immediate past chair of the Alliance for Women in Media. Please welcome Heather Cohen. Thea Mitchum is executive vice president of programming at iHeartMedia. In her EVP role, she oversees programming and operations for the New York City, Chicago, Philly, Boston, and DC markets. She also still directly manages the New York market and keeps her PD stripes at WWPR Power 105.1. Thea, who's known to a lot of the talent she works with as coach, oversees two of the biggest syndicated shows in radio, The Breakfast Club, which, under her leadership, has become the most listened to hip-hop and R&B morning show in America, as well as the newly launched Way Up with Angela Yee. With all this going on, she still manages to be iHeart's EVP of hip-hop strategy. Please welcome Thea Mitchum. And Leslie Simon. Leslie has spent the last 6 years as the general manager of Garth Brooks' Pearl Records and Trisha Yearwood's Gwendolyn Records. She's come a very long way from her first job in the industry as a temp at RCA Label Group. In between, she worked as Mindy McCready's tour manager in pop promotion for Capitol and spent 13 years at Sony, where she was the head of Arista Promo. And anyone who's made it this far in this industry is a fighter in some form or fashion. But Leslie is also open about her battle with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Last year, thanks to her incredible contributions to awareness and fundraising, the American Cancer Society honored her as part of their annual Hope Gala. Please welcome Leslie Simon. All right, so keep in mind that CRS app that I know you're all well acquainted with at this point. You do have the ability to submit questions, and we'll take as many as we can toward the end of the session. The session title today, as you know, is I'm Not Bossy, I'm the Boss, How These Women Have Navigated Their Male-Dominated Industries. And I want to make something really clear. We'll talk about how men in the workplace can be more aware of the challenges their female colleagues may face and help amplify their voices. But instead of simply reading the session description, which is in your app, questions, I'm just going to set the stage by throwing out some points on this topic. Some of you in the room may relate to this. Women are more likely to use the phrase, "I'm sorry," in their workplace communications, even when they're not actually apologizing, which can weaken their message. A 2017 Harvard study that reviewed 15 years of Supreme Court transcripts showed that male justices interrupt female justices approximately 3 times as often as they interrupt each other during oral arguments. And this is anecdotal in discussions with fellow hiring managers, but it's important, male candidates are more likely than women to apply for jobs where they don't meet every single qualification listed. Our panelists today have navigated male-dominated waters to be the boss, and they have so much wisdom to share with us today about how they got there that can benefit women on the come-up and their male allies. So we'll start with a question about today, right? And then get into some of the wisdom you have to share from your stories and your backstories. You're all bosses. Heather on the talent agent side, Thea on the radio and audio side, and Leslie on the label side. Now that you're in these positions, what are some high-level lessons you've learned about navigating the path to bossdom as a woman? And Thea, let's start with you here.
It's so interesting because you don't get into this business and say, my goal is to be the boss. I certainly didn't. I think it's important for me, when you talk about that, it's really about leadership. And I got into this business because I knew I wanted to be a program director, and I believed I had something to give, and I had vision. And so when you talk about leadership, the biggest lessons for me is your leader has to have vision. You have to be able to inspire your team. You're only as good as a team you build around you. And you have to understand that with leadership becomes responsibility, and that you really have to actually work harder than your entire team, because your team is looking for you for guidance. They're looking for you for tools. They're looking for you how to handle and navigate roadblocks and situations. And so for me, it was making sure that I was able to do that. At the same time, for me, it's about the audience, because I'm in radio, right? So it's also making sure I'm navigating that audience and building and so on and so forth. So we are the bosses, and that is true, and we've all gone to a certain level. But it started with the fundamental foundation of, I have something to give. I think my vision is great. I think it will serve the community, serve my listeners, serve the businesses that I work for, and I have confidence that I can take things to another level, and I can inspire the people around me to come on this journey with me, and that's really what it's all about. And then making sure you have discernment, that's important, and making sure you're able to step in and make the decisions to keep moving things forward. I set the pace. And you have to remember that as leadership, you're setting the pace of how quickly things happen, and you're holding people accountable. So those are, for me, some of the biggest things that I would say and takeaways.
Excellent, excellent. I'd like for all of you to think about your personal light bulb moment, right? So things have changed, and hopefully for the better, in the time that you guys were coming up. But when did you realize that you might have had to operate a little bit differently to make it in what then could have been characterized as a boys' club? And Heather, let's start with you.
Sure. I have 3 brief comments on that. I remember, and I see Becky Bennett from Westwood One is here. We grew up at WOR in New York together, and the ladies' room was outside the perimeter of the facility. So the men's room, now remember, this station is about, 100 years old now?
Over 100 years old.
Over 100 years old. There was no ladies' room inside the facility. I believe I was the first female and first non-union board op. Let me tell you, during a stop set, I could not make it to the ladies' room. So occasionally, I went into the men's room. Another thing that happened there, I filled in for a board op that was out on sick leave, and the male host called me Rob for 6 weeks on the air because he refused to say Heather. And then I think another thing that I'll mention, a few years later, I started attending most of the seminars, and I walked into my first talk radio seminar, and I looked around, and there were not very many women there, and certainly not, at the time I was a young woman, very few young women, and there are more today, but certainly not enough.
Leslie.
So I think one of the biggest light bulb moments for me was right when I started in promotion at Capitol. So this was pop promotion. I went to a market for one of my first, back then we had music meetings. I don't know if anybody's even familiar with a music meeting anymore, but that's when every single rep shows up to a radio station to hawk their wares to the program director. And this music meeting was set every week at a strip bar. And that's where we went. If we wanted to have a music meeting, you went to lunch at the strip bar, and then you went back to the studio and had your music meeting with the PD after. And I was 30 years old from Montgomery, Alabama. I had never set foot in a strip bar before. And so I walked in my seersucker pants and my ribbon high heel shoes and was absolutely floored that there were topless women in the place we were having lunch. But I realized at that point that if I wanted to be in the music meeting and I wanted to play the music, then I had to go to lunch and build those relationships. And it was a little shocking, but it was just part of what we did.
It's interesting. My aha came. It was my first time as a program director. I was in my mid-20s, and I went to New York for this meeting. And it was all the program directors and all the general managers and all the heads of sales for this company. It wasn't Clear Channel iHeart. It was my first company. But it was, for me as a young 20-something female, it was nothing but men and older men. And I sat there, and I had just turned on a station. And every time people walked up to talk about my station, they would look to the man next to me, who was also a programmer in Jason Mark, and they'd, how's that station going? So they wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't talk to me. They were talking about my station that I just launched, that I had been up 24/7, and I'm the only person there, and I'm pouring everything into it, and it's every staff that's getting hired, it's all me. But they didn't see me, and in that moment, I was like, oh, okay. And I literally watched them talk to everyone around me about this is my station. And I went into the bathroom, and I said to myself, which is what I would say to all women, I said, girl, you got to shake it off. This is ridiculous. And I looked in the mirror, and I'm like, whatever you're feeling, I literally talked to myself in the mirror. Whatever you're feeling, whatever anxiety you have, whatever not feeling like you belong because there are certainly no women, you can't allow this to continue. And I, just sucked it up and put my shoulders back, and I walked out. And of course, someone walked up and said to the man next to me, that station in Baltimore, it's really, and I said, yes, it is. Hi, I'm Thea Mitchum. I'm the program director. Nice to meet you, blah, 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 blah. We're doing this, this, and this, and this. And so, and I did that the entire rest of these meetings for 2 days, because there was no way I was going to sit there, and I'm working my ass off, and not be seen for the work that I was doing. So we have to not allow it to happen. I didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable. I just knew that I needed to exert myself and make sure people knew what I was doing, and that was a big moment for me.
That's great. We all work in parts of the music industry, even if we're adjacent. And the spirit can be a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, even if we're talking about country. Lots of showcases, lots of bars, lots of late nights, lots of travel. And when you three were coming up, again, maybe different times, definitely not 50-50 when it came to women in the industry, we promised specific actionable advice here for this session. So thinking back, what tactics have you used to balance the lifestyle demands of the job with the reality of being a woman that might be valuable to share with our audience?
Well, my secret, although now it's not a secret, is that I have to watch the drinking. We all have to watch the drinking. And I would do cranberry and soda or just cranberry juice. So, I might have a drink and then have cranberry and then another drink and then switch to cranberry. My boss, Eric Weiss, actually taught me that years ago, and he just said, look, you have to act professional at these events. Just watch the drinking, be careful. And at first, I think my feelings were hurt, and then I realized it was simple, but it was some of the best advice ever. So that's what I do.
That's great. Leslie.
I would say really the same thing. I think it's very important in these settings to remember that we're in a business. And even though it's a fun and exciting and music-driven business, it's still a business. And so when you are at a show, when you're doing those late nights, the more control you have over yourself, the better. And so I think really managing your consumption is incredibly important. And I think also just dressing with professionalism. You're not going to go to the office in your workout clothes. You need to remember that you're representing your artist and your company, your radio station. I mean, when you're out there, dress like a professional. There's no reason to dress super casual, and there's also no reason to dress in a way that might be too provocative for any business meeting. So those are the big things that I think are actionable that you can do. And then the last thing I would say, especially when it comes to late nights, is always be with someone else. There's no reason to be alone in an environment. It's just, in 2023, it's just not safe. And so, have a buddy, whether it's somebody from your label or from another label or a friend at the radio station, but definitely stay together with somebody else. My husband always used to say to me, don't get on that elevator by yourself when you come in at 2 a.m. Take the elevator up with somebody. Ask somebody at the front desk to take you to your hotel room. Just little things to be aware of to make sure you're protecting yourself and that you're in control of the situation.
Great advice for any industry you're in, right? Right. So myths about women in the workplace. Let's just go. Let's throw them out and let's talk about them.
Women are too emotional. I hear that all the time.
I've had more men cry in my office than women. just want to put that out there. I hear that all the time. I'm like, I don't know, guys.
I think that's definitely a good one. Heather, a big part of what you do as an agent is negotiating compensation. And your clients work for a wide range of companies, so I don't want to ask you to put anyone specific on blast, never would do that. But in general, do you find that you have to work harder for women to be paid what they're worth? And if so, can you share some tactics that you use to get them paid properly?
It's gotten a lot better. And I have to say thank you to Thea, because I know that you have pushed for that for many, many years. I see, I'm just one person, but I see tremendous improvement in that area. And I'm grateful and I'm thrilled, because when I started as an agent I guess it's almost 16 years ago, that was a conversation that I had all the time. All the time. So there's still a way, ways to go, certainly, but we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. In terms of tips, and this is something, I don't know if Mary Menn is in the room from Beasley, the Boston market manager, but, when I do a deal with a Mary, you always have to keep in mind, you have to do a deal that's fair for both sides. You always have to feel like you're leaving something on the table, and then it's probably a good deal. But go in with appropriate information. Get the metrics. What you don't want to do, whether you're doing it on your own or you have a representative, you don't want to throw a number against the wall. That's not the way to do this. Go in and be smart. And also, if a company is transparent with you, they share the metrics, they share not just the ratings, but I'm talking about the financials, you can very quickly figure out a deal that will be comfortable for everyone. So I think if you prepare appropriate questions, that will help you get to the number that you need to get to.
I just want to add to that, when you are negotiating, and this is something for the women in the room, it is important. The challenge is that a lot of folks don't talk about compensation, so you don't understand where the ceiling is, or where the floor is. And women have a tendency to be uncomfortable pushing back. And I would argue that you have to push back, because if not, if you don't push back, you're going to get just the bare minimum. And again, it's different times, you know, obviously when there's, when the finances aren't great and, you know, all that affects everyone. But ultimately, I think you have to know where you are. I can honestly say in my situation over the course of my career, there were times I took less because I wanted that particular opportunity, and I figured that opportunity, I could flip it into something that would be more benefit to me, and that happened. And so it was a conscious decision that I took less in order to get my foot in the door to prove myself for later. And it was also situations where I got paid less than my male counterpart, who was coming in after, and that certainly happened. But here's the thing: when you know more, you do better, right? And so the biggest thing is you go and you tell people what you think you're worth, and the best line you can say is, "That doesn't work for me." And people sometimes are pretty shocked when you say, "What do you mean that doesn't work for you?" And it's like, that just doesn't work for me. But you have to be willing to walk away. And if you're not willing to walk away, then don't get mad if the negotiations go in your favor. You have to be willing to leave. And I think it makes the biggest difference in the world.
I'll just add to that, when I was kind of coming up in this business, I remember that so many of the men had attorneys representing them in their negotiations. And the women, we were often encouraged not to bother with an attorney. And what I would say is, go get representation. Whether it's an attorney or an agent, have someone who, until this world becomes more transparent in salaries, and we sadly are not as transparent as we should be, you should make sure that you have somebody representing you in contractual negotiations, just like the men in this business do, because it is going to help you get into the position you need to be in. And the men are doing it, the women should be doing it as well.
Excellent, thank you. We mentioned male allies in the session description, and it's not to be politically correct, truly, but because men aren't, by and large, all inherently, anti-women in the workplace by nature, right? So I'm sure we've all run into some male jerks in the workplace, just as I've run into some female jerks in the workplace. We all have. But that doesn't apply to everybody. Have there been men in your career who were particularly helpful in navigating situations where being a woman might have put you at a disadvantage? And if so, let's mention who they are and how they helped.
I have been very, very lucky to work with some of, I think, the greatest men in this business who are also really big supporters of women executives, Joe Galani being the top of that list. And he would have lunches or breakfast. If you needed a meeting with him, you could always get a meeting with him. And the little tidbits of advice he gave early on and the support he had for women in the building. I mean, Renee Bell was our EVP of A&R back in a time when there just were not women holding that kind of a significant role at a label, and I was very inspired by that. Gary Overton sat me in his office and said, you've been working in this VP role without the title for X number of years, and I'm giving you that title. And that was a big move for me. And then obviously with Garth, he's such a supporter of women. I mean, he started the Pearl imprint with Mandy McCormick and I, and so just immediately put two women in roles of leadership. And I think really being encouraged by that support, but also taking the time to sit down with men and women in the industry who have made it to the place where these men had, and really listening in a conversation and asking advice of them is one of the best things that I have been able to do.
I've had so many big brothers and big sisters, and probably more big brothers, but my big sisters have been incredible. And truthfully, walking into that same talk radio seminar where there were so few women, the men were wonderful and became mentors. And, whether Gabe Hobbs, who used to be at iHeart, Mike McVeigh's in the room, Maurice Tunick, who used to run WOR. I mean, it's really I have a Harvey Nagler who ran CBS News. These were people that I could always call and say, am I doing the right thing? What is your advice? And I'm forever grateful.
I mean, for me, Jay Stevens was one of my first program directors. Doc Winter has been such a champion of women within my company. Clay Honeycutt, who many of you guys know, is the person who convinced me to go to New York 11 years ago. So thanks, Clay. It's interesting, there's not as many women, and so you need your big brothers to lean on. You need to develop that tribe of people who you can call and say, hey, I'm unsure. And when Clay was trying to convince me to go to New York, and I was unsure I wanted to leave Washington, D.C., I called Jay Stevens. I hadn't talked to him in like a year and a half. That's the other thing, mentors and mentorship happens at different times. I said, can you meet me at the Starbucks down the corner at such and such? He was like, sure, what's going on, what's wrong? I said, they want me to go to New York, and what do you think about that? And he was like, he's like, it's an incredible gig, what are you talking about? But the point is, after years of not seeing someone, I was able to call and say, I need you to meet me 15 minutes down the street. Because that's really what it is about, and finding people who believe in you, who have poured into you, who want to see you successful, who are happy about your success is really, really, really key. And I would argue that for me, and I have a sisterhood of women who we all have kind of come up together, but I would argue that in my career, the folks who have maybe opened the doors for me have been men. And so I always, appreciate that and am respectful of that.
I just want to add, I think we all had our mentors, but I think we all do a lot of mentoring. And that is so important. And shameless plug for the Alliance for Women in Media. Thea and I are both on that board. But it's more important than ever to give back. We don't all have interns anymore. We don't necessarily have promotions departments. We don't necessarily have the bench that we used to. It is so important. Remember who brought you up and just continue to bring other people up, men and women.
It's actually it's the one thing for me that is most inspiring, right? I mean, when I open those doors for men and women, people who are deserving, who work hard, where you see it's like, oh, you're 19 or you're 20 years old, and I know you could be the biggest thing ever, and I can pour into you. There's nothing that makes me is more gratifying to me at this point in my career than pouring into folks.
Excellent, excellent. We've come on to our final segment of today's talk, and then we'll get into questions. Little birdie's telling me there's a lot of great stuff coming in through the app. All of our panelists have these handy agree and disagree cards. I'm going to go ahead and throw out some statements, and they're just visually going to show us if they agree or disagree. As we all know in this world, two things can be true at once, so they might use both. For some of them, we'll just get some quick feedback. For some of them, we'll talk a little bit more about their answers. So I'm going to start this series of statements. Women are more timid about asking for raises and promotions than men are. Okay, all right, the contrarian here, sort of.
Getting better, we're getting better. So, I was the young person that never hesitated to go in and ask for an increase, but that was me. That is why I'm.
That's why she's an agent.
But I am so thrilled to see that there are many women who do feel confident now to go in and say, I deserve this, I've contributed this, look how many endorsements I have, look at the relationships that I brought to the table. I mean, you have to go in with facts, but it's still a small percentage, but we're doing better.
Excellent. Anything anybody wants to quickly share about what those women who may be timid should be doing?
I kind of think we hit on that in the negotiation. I think it's really important, as I said, to get representation. I think it's just key to stepping up in that area.
Excellent, excellent. The best way for women to get ahead in the workplace is to work hard and keep their heads down. Okay, Leslie.
So the agree is to work hard, because there's nothing more important than your work ethic. and being able to go out there and work hard. But as far as putting your head down, I absolutely disagree. I think it's important to know who you are, to know your role, and to have confidence in what you're doing, and to not be afraid to say, this is what my team and I are doing. This is how we're moving this business forward. And truthfully, you know, especially in the label world, you've got to learn how to manage down, but also to manage up. And so putting your head down is keeping you from looking up to manage up.
Excellent. 2 more questions, then we'll get into audience questions. Other women in the workplace always have your back. All right. Anyone want to jump in on their?
You know, I think there are a lot of women in the workplace who do have your back, but there are also women who do not. And, you know, our guts are really a powerful thing. And I think when you have a gut feeling that someone is not truly a friend and an ally, then, you know, embrace them as a human being, but don't count on them to be a friend and an ally. And then when you find the women who are, make that connection as strong as you can and build that bond together.
I would say women are not monolithic, right? Just because we're women doesn't mean we're all always going to agree with each other or be on the same path or have the same vision. And so you have to understand the difference. And to your point, you have to understand who the ally is. And so I don't want you guys to look at that as a negative and say, oh yeah, because women are catty. Because women aren't catty. But this idea that we all have to think the same is not realistic. And I think that's the biggest challenge. They're like, oh, all the women think the same thing. It's like, we don't all think the same thing. We have different points of views. We're human first. And I think that's, to me, is what stands out the most.
Great. Final agree or disagree. I never again want to hear anyone ask a female executive, how do you do it all? All right. And thoughts?
I'm proud when somebody says, how do you do it all? And I don't do it all, and I can't do it all, and I'll never do it all, but I do as much as I can to the best of my ability. And I realize that not everybody agrees with this statement, certainly, but for me personally, I'm proud of what I've accomplished and still have goals like that.
It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, first of all of us, men and women, are doing so much. All of us are working probably harder than we've all worked before. There's limited resources, limited budgets, people power. And so I think it's a testament to everyone out there who are working at that level. And so it doesn't bother me at all. Ultimately, all of us are managing our lives and our businesses and having some fun, hopefully, along the way as well. And it can be challenging. And also, we all also have barriers and obstacles and problems. I always say that I'm probably a problem solver first, meaning that everyone comes to me with their problems and I figure out what the next steps are. And it can be a lot, and it can be a lot to manage. And so to Heather's point, I'm proud of that too, and the question doesn't bother me whatsoever.
I find it as a compliment, actually. And I think that the further you go in your career and the more of a boss that you become, being able to manage it all and handle it all is what helps inspire other people to be leaders and to do the same.
To wrap it up, right before we get to questions, think about your superpower. Think about your superpower. What makes you a great leader, a great person, and highly equipped to be the boss?
So I think for women especially, you know, I grew up in a world where I was trying to learn how to be a leader by some of the men who were leading me. And when I was really young and early in this industry, that wasn't necessarily a positive. Some of the men who were above me were yellers. I mean, they were screamers. You know, they really tried to beat people into submission to get what they wanted. And so as a young person coming up in the industry, I thought at first that's what you had to do to get ahead and to, you know, show that you were the boss. And I quickly learned, and I say quickly, some of it I'm still learning, is that the greatest asset you have as a woman is your empathy, your compassion, your kindness, your ability to communicate, your ability to listen. And so if you take those nurturing aspects of who you are as a human being and you take your uniqueness and you turn that in to how you lead other people and to how you run your business, that's the greatest gift you can give your team and the people around you. So that's what I would say, is really using those feminine qualities as your superpower.
It's interesting. I think my superpower from a business standpoint is I'm definitely a driver. So that's definitely one of my biggest superpowers. But I can see what's coming down the bend before most people can see it. And in people, in our industry, where things are going, I have foresight. And that has helped me immensely in my career. Because I'm able to create strategy before we even get there and have tactics to back that up. And then my biggest strength is how I deal with people. I believe in people. Again, as I've said on the stage earlier, it's all about your team. And so I pour into people, coach people, they coach me back, because it works both ways. You learn from your folks. And so you put all that together, I think it makes for, a pretty successful person. What can I say?
Indeed. I was going to say empathy, but I'll share what I had asked this question of a friend, and he said, "You're undaunted." And I thought about that for a moment. And you know what, Thea, I know you well. You're undaunted. I see Julie Talbot here. Julie's undaunted. It does take a lot to get under my skin and for me to really back down, which gets me in trouble on occasion. But it also, I think it's a good skill as well.
You can't be sensitive. You can't be sensitive. You got to be able to roll with the punches and keep it moving and not wallow in something that didn't work out or didn't go well or someone said something. You got to just keep it moving and keep your eye on that prize.
Let things roll off your back.
Yeah, and remember, everyone, Thea's had more men in her office crying than women, so that's not necessarily a feminine quality, but something to keep in mind. Joey, I hear that you have a lot of great questions for the team.
Is this on? Awesome. All right, we have time for maybe 2 questions, but these are great. And this is a 2-parter. If you are, quote, nice by nature, do you have to be tough to get respect? And paired up with that, women in leadership in any male-dominant industry are often referred to as a certain word or derogatory terms for being assertive in the same way that men can be. How do you react or respond, or do you?
Well, I'll go with your last question. Are we saying bitch? Is that what we're saying? Okay. Or worse. Ultimately, that's their problem, not mine. I am here to do a job. I'm about my business. I look at things like that as a way to try to jar me, to get me off my game, to offend me. It's like you wouldn't say it to a man, so if you say it to me, it's not going to affect me either, because I look at it as a manipulation. They're trying to get you to react. They're trying to get you to focus on that. And I also think as a woman, you can't be concerned about that. As long as my intentions are exactly where they should be, and it's about moving the business forward or growing a talent or whatever it may be, or just trying to get the ball from here to there, I'm doing my job and my intentions are pure. Anything you can say about that, because I'm always respectful, it doesn't matter. It doesn't hit me whatsoever.
I would add that, much to Thea's point, it's just a distraction. That's all it is. Calling someone a name because they are assertive or confident is simply a distraction. Don't let it distract you. Move on.
And I think for the first question, you can be nice and tough at the same time, but you do need to be tough. And you need to have confidence and be prepared. Always be prepared when you're, gauge your boss, but be prepared when you go in. And don't be, I do see, unfortunately, still so many women who don't want to cause a wave. And I hear that all the time. I don't want to I don't want to cause any waves. I don't want to be a problem. I just want to be easy for my boss. no, you need to open that door. If you want to move forward, you have to open your own door. You have to.
How can men help support women in this industry?
Well, I think the first thing men can do is notice when you're in a room with women and men, and you're brainstorming or sharing ideas, and notice that the woman to the left of you said an idea, and then everyone kept talking, and then the man said the same idea 5 minutes later, and was like, "That's a great idea, John." You want to be an ally? Acknowledge that she already said it. Oh, isn't that the same thing that she said? You know, it's important for you guys to pay attention to what happens, because that happens to women all the time. You know, when us women get together, we discuss that. So being an ally, I think that is important. The other thing is pay attention to your own microaggressions. I was in a meeting with men and women the other day, and it was a brainstorm, and there was a junior female in there, and she was quiet the entire meeting. And everyone was talking, and it was a brainstorm. It was a mix. And at the end of the meeting, when we were finishing the meeting and getting ready to leave, she said, "Oh, one more thing." And she said something to the talent. She was speaking to the talent. She said, "Oh, I just would love for you to do this." And a guy came from the left of me and was like, yeah, we're going to do this," and kind of cut her off and was assertive with her. And then everyone just kept talking, and they were leaving. And I asked him to stay in my office. And I said, "What the hell was that?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "The girl didn't speak the whole meeting. She finally at the end opens her mouth to say something. She was talking to the talent. She wasn't talking to you. You immediately cut her off." "Well, I knew what she was going to say." And I said, "Did you know what she was going to say?" And he's like, "Well," I said, "You didn't even let her get it out her mouth." And he said, "I didn't realize that." And I was like, "Not cool. Fix it." You know what I mean? Like, you have to be aware of that. And it doesn't mean it's like, "You're a woman, let me let you talk," because ultimately, you know, as folks who know me, I'm the queen of cutting people off. So you know, you let me talk, I keep talking. But the point is, you have to just be aware of the fact that people do treat some women differently, and sometimes they don't hear their voices, not because they're bad people, they just didn't realize that they, you know, had decided, "Well, I already knew what she was going to say, so what was the point?" It's like, no, the point is the woman had the right to open her mouth and have a conversation.
I'm going to be very specific. We absolutely have to develop our future female programmers. And I know I realize the room that I'm in, but there are so few in talk. There are certainly more now in music, but it's still not enough. Look at the MIW study that just came out. Please, if you are in that space, bring women up, because we desperately need them. I will say, though, most of the men in my circle are doing a tremendous amount of mentoring, and I probably get a phone call 2 or 3 times a week. Yesterday, Jim Higgins called me on the way to the airport, and he said, "There's a young broadcaster. I think she really, you know, I'd love for her to talk to you. I think she could benefit from MIW, from AWM." I get those calls from men constantly, and I just see men trying to help. It's wonderful.
Excellent. Well, I just think this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank everyone who's attended. Go have fun at the Ryman, right?
Thanks, Zena.
Thank you.